The afternoon felt almost unreal in its perfection. The sunlight rested gently on the polished tables, the air carried the soft hum of expensive cars rolling across cobblestone streets, and waiters moved with a practiced grace that made the entire place feel like a scene from a carefully curated world. Alistair Munro sat among it all, a man used to order, precision, and uninterrupted comfort. His everyday was built around predictability, the kind of life where nothing unexpected was ever allowed to slip through the cracks. Yet on this particular afternoon, just as he lifted his fork, that perfect world trembled. A small figure burst from the far end of the street, running, stumbling, desperately pushing through startled diners. Her clothes were torn, her face streaked with dust, and her tiny bare feet slapped against the stones with a speed fueled by pure fear. Nobody knew who she was or why she was running. But the moment she reached Alistair's table and cried out, "Don't eat that," the entire atmosphere shifted. In that single breath, the peaceful charm of Ravenstone Avenue shattered, replaced by a tension so sharp it stopped every conversation mid-sentence. And everything began to change. She stood there trembling, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to breathe, yet her eyes stayed locked on the bowl in front of Alistair as if her entire world depended on stopping him. People assumed she had come to beg, but her posture said something entirely different. She wasn't reaching out for food. She wasn't asking for pity. She wasn't even looking at the billionaire whose meal she had interrupted. Instead, every ounce of her energy was focused on warning him, pulling him away, protecting him from something no one else could see. Her small hands shook, not with hunger but with fear, the kind of fear that comes from seeing something terrible and knowing no one will believe you. There was something painfully honest about her desperation, something that cut through the polished elegance of the restaurant like a cold gust of wind. She didn't care about where she was, who she was shouting at, or how out of place she looked among suits and silk dresses. All she cared about was making sure he didn't take another bite. And the courage it took for a child with nothing to step into a world where she belonged nowhere was enough to make even the harshest critic hesitate. In that just moments before she burst onto the scene, Talia had been standing in the narrow alley behind the restaurant, searching through trash bins for anything she could eat. That's when she noticed the kitchen door swing open and a man step out, but not with the calm confidence of a chef on break. He moved with nervous, darting eyes, constantly checking over his shoulder as if afraid of being caught. She watched him pull a small vial from his pocket, his hands unsteady, and empty its contents into the bowl prepared for the wealthy man dining outside. She didn't know who Alistair was, but she knew danger when she saw it, and she knew this wasn't a simple mistake or accident. From where she stood, hidden by shadows, she saw the man disappear into the crowded street, slipping away as if he had done something unforgivable. Her heart hammered as she realized the food she had just seen him tamper with was being carried to the very table where Alistair now sat. It wasn't hunger or desperation that sent her running. It was the instinct to save someone, anyone, even a stranger. And with that, the truth behind her warning finally began to surface.
Alistair had spent years surrounded by polished surfaces, guarded doors, and people who rarely challenged him. But as he looked at the little girl standing before him, something inside him shifted. For the first time, he truly saw her. The bruises on her arms weren't accidents, they were stories. The dirt on her cheeks wasn't neglect, it was survival. And the trembling in her voice wasn't weakness, it was strength pushed to its limits. When she finally explained what she had seen in the alley, the man, the vial, the fear that chased her all the way to his table, her words carried a weight that no child should ever have to bear. That he listened as she spoke about sleeping alone on cold concrete, about hiding from dangerous men, and about her mother disappearing 2 nights earlier without a trace. She didn't cry, even though her voice cracked. She was used to swallowing her pain. But Alistair wasn't. For a man who built empires, it was the first time in years that something pierced through his armor. The world he controlled so easily suddenly felt fragile compared to the reality this child had lived through. And in that fragile moment, his heart finally opened.
The moment Alistair understood the depth of what Talia had endured, something in him refused to let her walk back into that cold, uncertain world alone. With a quiet firmness, he contacted the authorities, and soon detectives arrived, listening carefully as Talia described every detail she remembered: where she last saw her mother, which buildings she had searched, even the sounds she heard the night her mother disappeared. It wasn't much, but it was enough for trained eyes to start connecting threads. And with Alistair's resources pushing the search forward, things moved quickly in a way they never could have for a child on her own. Hours passed, the sun lowering behind the skyline as officers combed through abandoned warehouses and locked storage rooms. Talia waited anxiously, her small hands gripping Alistair's coat like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Then, just as hope began to flicker, a call came through. A faint voice had been heard inside a collapsed storage room. Moments later, they found her mother alive but injured, trapped for 2 long nights where no one had heard her cries. And as Talia ran into her mother's arms, the world finally felt right again. As the sirens slowly faded and the city settled back into its familiar rhythm, Alistair found himself standing a few steps away, watching the moment unfold with a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He had spent his life surrounded by power, influence, and walls built so high that nothing truly real could reach him. Yet here he was, humbled by the courage of a child who had nothing to her name but a fierce heart and an unshakable instinct to do what was right. Talia didn't save him for reward, recognition, or praise. She acted because she couldn't walk away from danger, even when no one else believed her. That kind of bravery wasn't taught in boardrooms or bought with wealth, it lived only in those who had faced life at its harshest and still chose kindness. Watching her cling to her mother, Alistair realized that sometimes the people society overlooks carry the greatest strength. Sometimes the smallest voices deliver the most powerful warnings. And sometimes, a single act of courage can change the path of someone who seemed untouchable. In that moment, he understood that true humanity often comes from the most unexpected places.